what matters most is what happens in the brains and lives of our students. Like that is the end all be all of education, right? It's different from doctors, right? Like a doctor, when I guess a doctor is, you know, in a doctor, like you, I guess it's like a doctor in the sense that they're controlling the health of their patients, right? And so, like, I guess when you measure how well a doctor's doing, you measure the health of the patient. When you measure how good a teacher's doing, you measure the learning health of the student. And so curriculum from that standpoint, we could spend 10,000 hours building curriculum. And if it doesn't translate into actual actions of the students, you're useless, right? But one of the things that's really interesting about the curriculum process is the structure. Like when I create curriculum, one of the things that I'm doing is training myself in that curriculum and really developing what you might call like a fully integrated approach to that, right? So like in the Math 1D stuff, one of the things that I think was really interesting about that class is I was actually teaching myself that class while we were running the class, right? Because I hadn't seen that material since like 2004, 2005. So I knew nothing about, I didn't even remember the words like gradient field and conservative field before I started that class, right? And so the reality, I mean, at that point in my career, the 3 days before that class ran, I taught myself the entire class, but I didn't do it in what I would call a deep learning mechanism. I did it at a 10,000 foot view. So I tried to get a sense of where's the class going, what are the major ideas, why are these theorems important, how do they fit into the larger field? And then on a day-to-day basis, I would put together that 10,000 foot view with the actual components, right? But in doing that, one of the interesting things was having to go through that curriculum as a teacher meant that I was very empathetic to the students that were going to follow my tracks. And I could actually, imitate or empathize. I could predict many of the questions that would come up in those contexts and then build answers to those questions in to the way that I presented the curriculum. And then this gets into Ambrose et al. With the scaffolding idea. You know, there's that famous, in that chapter about scaffolding and mastery, there's that famous result that if you want a student to make connections, you have to physically, spend time in the actual lecture making the connections. It's not about you individually, Jeff, it's about the student spending that time, right? But students students follow the teacher's lead, right? So if the teacher doesn't do it out loud, the student's not going to intuit, oh, I should be doing this, right? And so from that standpoint, when we're developing, I agree with you completely that the podcast, the videos, all that shit is useless from the standpoint of actual student action. Why I think that's important, though, is two reasons. Number one, the process of us training, like one of the reasons, I suppose you could say this is selfish, but it's selfish in a value system that is very altruistic, that is focused on the other, right? It's selfish in the sense that like I'm actually having to spend the time to do it for myself, but the entire purpose of that is not so that I'm hoarding the knowledge. The entire purpose of it is that I'm leveraging all of that time and sacrifice to save other people time and sacrifice. So the reason that I think that the blog posts and the Canvas site and the videos and podcasts, or that's something that you brought into the project, I think it's a good medium. In doing those projects, we're actually forcing ourselves to go very, very slowly through the entire process of what it means to understand this at a deep level. And that serves not only to be able to empathize with students and I don't know if you've had this where you've been reading associated with this project and you learned words in your reading to describe an experience that you had in your real life in academia.
Big time. Genetic determinism, for example.
Yeah. That's awesome. I would love to hear what